I came home early on a Thursday. A server migration wrapped ahead of schedule, and for once Denver traffic worked in my favor. I remember feeling almost light walking up to our condo, thinking I'd surprise Sarah with takeout from that Thai place she liked. That's when I saw it. A dark blue BMW sat in front of our building, still clean from the dealership. Temporary tags. No parking permit. It didn't belong to anyone in our complex. I know that because I notice things, cars, patterns, who comes and goes. It's a habit from years in IT consulting. Systems make sense when you pay attention. Sarah was standing beside it. She wasn't confused. She wasn't concerned. She was twirling a set of keys around her finger like she'd been waiting for an audience. When she saw me, she smiled. Not wide, not nervous. Calm. It's mine, she said. Just like that. For a second, I thought maybe she'd traded in the Lexus. But the Lexus was still parked in its usual spot. I looked back at the BMW, then at her. Yours? I asked. She nodded. Yeah. I didn't want to tell you until it was finalized. She walked around the front of the car, running her hand lightly along the hood. It wasn't excitement. It was ownership. I remember noticing how still everything felt. No wind. No passing traffic. Just the faint ticking of a cooling engine. In that moment, something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. And I knew, whatever this was, whatever explanation followed, our life had just stepped into a different shape. There was no going back to the version of us that existed before that car. Sarah and I had been together 10 years. Long enough to build habits that felt permanent. We met in our mid-20s, both steady, both careful. No fireworks. No chaos. Just two people who valued predictability. We bought the condo in Denver 5 years ago. Split everything down the middle. Mortgage on autopay. Joint savings for vacations. Separate retirement accounts we reviewed once a quarter like responsible adults. Our life ran on routine. Weekdays started the same way. I'd leave around 7:30, laptop bag over my shoulder, coffee in a travel mug. She'd head downtown to the investment firm where she worked as an associate portfolio manager. Her hours were longer than mine, but that never bothered me. Finance is demanding. I understood that. We cooked most nights. Simple meals. Salmon, rice, roasted vegetables. Sometimes takeout on Fridays. Sundays were for laundry and grocery runs. Twice a year we traveled, usually somewhere structured. It was the kind of life people describe as stable, and it was. Sarah loved her old Lexus. It wasn't flashy, but it was reliable. I'd offered more than once to upgrade it. My consulting contracts had been good the past few years, and we could afford something newer. She always declined. It runs fine, she'd say. I don't need anything fancy. That was part of what unsettled me about the BMW. It wasn't just new. It was unnecessary. I knew about Nick, of course. He was a senior partner at her firm. Married. Early 40s. Clean cut in the kind of way that looks expensive. Sarah mentioned him occasionally, mostly in the context of projects. Nick liked my presentation. Nick wants me on this account. Nick thinks I'm ready for more responsibility. I never saw him as a threat. Work relationships blur lines sometimes, but I trusted her. Or maybe I trusted the pattern of us. Looking back, the signals were there. Late meetings that stretched past 9 p.m. A new passcode on her phone. Shorter answers to simple questions. Everything okay? I'd ask. Yeah, just tired. There were small changes, too. Subtle ones. She started dressing sharper for work. Higher heels. Different perfume. Not dramatic, just elevated. I told myself it was ambition. Promotions demand polish. The first time I noticed she turned her phone face down at dinner, I didn't think much of it. The second time, I did. By the third, it became a data point. But data points don't mean anything without context. And I didn't want to build a narrative out of coincidence. So I ignored it. That's what people do when the alternative feels disruptive. They protect the version of reality that's easier to live in. Until a dark blue BMW appears in your driveway. Until your wife stands beside it, calm, composed, and waiting for you to react. That's when routine stops feeling like security and starts feeling like a cover. I didn't ask the right question that night. I should have asked how she could afford it, or why she hadn't mentioned even browsing for a new car. Instead, I asked something smaller. How? She didn't hesitate. It was a gift, she said. From Nick. For closing the Harrison portfolio. It was a huge win for the firm. The word gift settled between us like something fragile. A car? I asked. She shrugged slightly. It's leased. 3 years. He handled the paperwork. There it was. Not a bonus process through payroll. Not a performance incentive structured by HR. Handled. In his name? I said. Yes, she replied, her tone tightening. It's not that complicated. But it was. Leases aren't one-time gestures. They're monthly obligations. Recurring payments. Insurance. Liability. A signature that binds you to someone for a defined period of time. That's when the pieces rearranged themselves in my head. This wasn't generosity. It was continuity. A car parked outside our condo. Registered under another man's responsibility. Tied to her daily life. Visible. I nodded once and said nothing. Inside, though, something locked into place. My coworker bought my wife a car. I stopped trusting everything. Not in a dramatic way. Not with anger or accusations. Trust didn't explode. It dissolved. Every late meeting now had a shape. Every Friday dinner with the team had a face. Every time she turned her phone screen away from me, it had weight. Are you upset? She asked after a moment. I looked at her carefully. No, I said. And it wasn't entirely a lie. Upset implies surprise. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was recalibrating. You're overthinking it, she added. This is normal in our industry. A leased BMW from a married senior partner was normal? Maybe in her world it was. But in ours, it wasn't. I walked around the car once more before going inside. Dark blue. Clean lines. Leather interior. Still smelling new. It didn't feel like success. It felt like evidence. That night, she placed the keys on the kitchen counter like they belonged there. Like the car was simply an upgrade, nothing more. I watched her move through the apartment, comfortable, unbothered. That's when I understood something else. If she could accept something like that without seeing what it meant, then we weren't standing on the same ground anymore. And once you realize that, you stop arguing. You start observing. I didn't argue about the car. That surprised her more than anything. Most husbands, I imagine, would have raised their voice. Questioned motives. Demanded the lease be canceled. I did none of that. I treated it like a software anomaly. Observe first, react later. Are you sure this is appropriate? I asked that night while she loaded dishes into the washer. She didn't look at me. Nick appreciates my work. It's not a crime to reward performance. Reward. I dried my hands on a towel and studied her posture. Relaxed shoulders. No visible guilt. Just mild irritation that I wasn't celebrating with her. I'm not saying it's a crime, I said evenly. I'm just saying it's significant. She turned then. You're making it weird. That was the moment I understood something clearly. If I pushed, I would become the problem. So I stopped pushing. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. The next morning, she drove the BMW downtown for the first time. I watched from the balcony as the engine started quietly, smooth and expensive. She didn't wave goodbye like she usually did. She adjusted the mirrors and pulled away. I stood there longer than necessary. Inside, I accepted a simple truth. People don't give gifts like that without a reason. Not at that level. Not with that visibility. Not without expectation. But I didn't accuse her of anything. Instead, I made a decision. I shifted from participant to observer. That week, I stopped initiating difficult conversations. I stopped asking about her schedule. I stopped offering to pick her up if she worked late. Externally, I became easier. Internally, I became precise. I reviewed our joint accounts one evening after she went to bed. Not because I suspected financial misconduct, just to understand the landscape. Everything was normal. Mortgage paid. Utilities consistent. No unusual transfers. But I noticed something else. Her personal spending had increased. New clothes. Salon charges. Restaurants I didn't recognize. Individually, none of it meant much. Together, it formed a pattern. She started keeping her phone in her purse even at home. Bathroom trips grew longer. Notifications were muted. I didn't confront her. I watched. The silence between us changed texture. It wasn't hostile. It was careful. She sensed something was different, I think. But she interpreted it as maturity. As trust. In reality, it was distance. I began looking at her differently. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. More like someone who had already stepped halfway out of our marriage and was waiting to see if the rest of her would follow. I slept fine. Ate normally. Went to work. But something inside me had recalibrated. When trust weakens, it doesn't announce itself. It just withdraws quietly, like water receding before a storm. and I had stopped believing the explanations before she finished giving them. Patterns don't reveal themselves all at once. They surface gradually, like hairline cracks in drywall. Easy to miss if you're not looking directly at them. Once I shifted into observation mode, I stopped relying on what Sarah said and started tracking what she did. Her firm occupied 2 floors downtown. I knew the parking garage she used. One Tuesday evening, I told her I had a late client call and drove down there instead. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:42 p.m., she walked out. At 6:43, Nick followed. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. They walked close enough that proximity told the story. Same direction. Same pace. He opened the BMW's passenger door for her. She laughed at something he said. He didn't get into the car. She drove away alone. That detail mattered. If they were careless, I would have seen it. Instead, what I saw was discipline, structure, a system. Friday team dinners increased from once a month to nearly every week. Always at places slightly outside our usual radius. Restaurants I'd never heard her mention before. I checked the firm's social media accounts. Team photos were posted occasionally, group shots at long tables. Nick stood beside her in most of them. Nothing inappropriate, but always close. Her phone habits sharpened. Face down at dinner. Notifications silenced. Bathroom trips with it in hand. When it buzzed, she glanced first at the screen before reacting. One Saturday morning, she showered while her purse sat open on the kitchen chair. The BMW keys were visible. A second key fob I hadn't noticed before sat beside them. 2 keys. 2 access points. That's when I decided to stop guessing. I hired a private investigator the following Monday. Quiet. Referred by a colleague who'd gone through a difficult divorce. I met him in a coffee shop near Union Station. I don't want assumptions, I told him. Just documentation. He nodded like he'd heard that sentence 100 times. For 2 weeks, I said nothing to Sarah. I went to work. Cooked dinner. Asked about her day. Kept my voice neutral. The reports began arriving in small, precise emails. Photos outside cafes near her office. Shared rides to parking structures. A dinner in Cherry Creek where they stayed 2 hours past the rest of the group. Then came the business trip. Austin. 3 days. Client meetings. The investigator confirmed Nick was on the same flight. They checked into the same hotel. 2 separate rooms. That detail slowed my breathing for a moment. Until the next image arrived. Time-stamped at 11:17 p.m. Sarah entering his room. She didn't leave until 7:03 a.m. There were no dramatic photos. No explicit scenes. Just timestamps. Doorways. Elevators. Evidence doesn't need emotion. It just needs clarity. I sat at the kitchen table that night while she described long meetings and early mornings. I nodded at the right places. Inside, the tension built. Not loud, not explosive. Tight. Controlled. The system was complete now, and I was done guessing. The first time I saw the photo of them kissing, I didn't react. It was inside his car. Dark parking garage. Grainy lighting. Her hand on his shoulder. His face angled toward hers like it had done that before. It wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. The timestamp was from a Thursday evening. One of the team dinners. The car was parked 2 levels below her office building. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. Up until that moment, this had felt contained. A private fracture. Something between me, Sarah, and the quiet discipline of a man who observes before he moves. The kiss changed that. Because Nick wasn't single. He was married. 2 children. Suburban house in Greenwood Village. Photos online from charity events and firm retreats. A wife who stood beside him in tailored dresses, smiling the way people smile when they believe their foundation is solid. This wasn't just an affair. It was a structural failure across 2 homes. I asked the investigator one more question. Does his wife know? He paused before answering. Not yet. I didn't tell Sarah I knew. I didn't confront her. Instead, I requested copies of everything. The cafe photos. The hotel timestamps. The garage images. The kiss. Documentation. Clean. Organized. Chronological. The investigator asked if I wanted him to reach out to Nick's wife discreetly. No, I said. I'll handle that. Not out of anger. Not to create damage. Just because truth spreads on its own when you stop containing it. I drafted a short email that evening. No insults. No threats. Just facts and attached files. I read it 3 times before sending it to the address listed under her real estate profile. Subject, information you should see. I didn't expect a reply. I received one the next morning. 2 words. Thank you. That was it. The next week at Sarah's firm shifted. She mentioned tension in passing. An unexpected internal review. Closed-door meetings among senior partners. Nick's name stopped appearing in her stories. She referred to him only as management. Rumors, apparently, travel faster in finance than in residential neighborhoods. Someone had leaked something. Or someone had confronted someone. I didn't ask. The BMW remained in our driveway, but it felt different now. Less like a trophy, more like a liability. Sarah came home one evening quieter than usual. She set her bag down slowly. There's a lot going on at work, she said. I can imagine, I replied. She studied my face as if searching for something. Accusation, maybe. I gave her none. Because by then, it was no longer just about betrayal. It was about consequences unfolding in real time. 2 families. 1 workplace. A leased car had turned into a chain reaction, and I had stopped standing in the way of it. I chose a Tuesday evening. No special reason. Just a quiet night. No work events. No external noise to blame. Sarah was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone when I walked in with a slim manila envelope. I set it on the table between us and sat down. What's that? She asked. Something we should look at. Her posture stiffened, but she didn't reach for it immediately. I opened the envelope myself and slid the photos out one at a time. Cafe, parking garage, hotel hallway. The image inside his car. No commentary. No emotion. Just paper against wood. She stared at the first photo longer than I expected. By the third, her breathing had changed. Where did you get these? She asked quietly. I hired someone. That landed heavier than the images. You were spying on me? I was verifying. Her eyes moved back to the hotel timestamp. 11:17 p.m. M. Entry. 7:03 a.m. M. Exit. It wasn't supposed to, she started, then stopped. Go that far. I offered. She swallowed. Yes. I nodded once. I know. Silence filled the room. Thick, but not chaotic. There was no shouting. No accusations. The evidence didn't require volume. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough. She pressed her fingers against her forehead like she was calculating damage. It started as mentorship, she said. Then it blurred. It didn't blur, I replied calmly. It progressed. She looked up at me then, searching for anger. You're not even yelling, she said. I don't need to. That seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. I was going to end it, she added quickly. Work has been complicated. His wife found out. I know, I said. Her head snapped up. You told her? Yes. A long pause followed that. You had no right. I had every right. She leaned back in her chair, as if the structure beneath her had shifted. What happens now? She asked. I slid the remaining photos back into the envelope. I'm filing for divorce. The word didn't echo. It settled. She didn't cry. Not immediately. Instead, she stared at the BMW keys sitting on the counter. I'll return the car, she said quietly. It's not about the car. It never was. She finally looked at me without defense. I messed up, she said. I didn't think it would destroy everything. I stood up slowly. It didn't destroy everything, I replied. It revealed it. That was the last full conversation we had in that kitchen as husband and wife. No screaming. No slammed doors. Just 2 people sitting across from the truth, realizing it had already moved beyond negotiation. Once the decision was made, everything moved with a kind of quiet efficiency. I contacted an attorney the morning after our conversation. Not a dramatic call, just a scheduled consultation in a glass office downtown. I brought organized documentation, financial statements, mortgage details, retirement accounts, copies of the lease agreement for the BMW. Preparation replaces panic. Sarah didn't contest the filing. That surprised some people, I'm sure. But by then the firm's internal review had already altered her standing. Nick had been placed on administrative leave. His wife had filed first. Workplaces don't tolerate liability well. The BMW disappeared from our driveway within a week. She said Nick handled it. I didn't ask how that conversation went. We listed the condo that same month. Neutral staging. Professional photos. A tidy description about changing circumstances. There's a strange detachment in watching strangers walk through your living room, evaluating square footage while your marriage dissolves behind the scenes. We agreed to split everything evenly. No drawn-out negotiations. No strategic sabotage. I didn't pursue damages related to the affair. I didn't need leverage. I needed closure. The condo sold faster than expected. Denver's market was still strong. We signed papers in separate rooms at the title office. Even the logistics felt symbolic. Nick attempted to protect his position at the firm, but internal compliance reviews aren't sentimental. Senior partners represent risk when their judgment falters publicly. He wasn't fired outright, but he was removed from leadership roles and reassigned to advisory status. That kind of demotion travels quietly but permanently. Sarah's promotion track stalled. Not officially, just gradually. High-visibility projects shifted elsewhere. Her name appeared less in firm communications. I didn't intervene. Consequences don't require force when the facts are documented. We divided furniture without argument. She kept most of it. I took what fit in a one-bedroom apartment near Capitol Hill. Clean lines, minimal decoration, intentional emptiness. The first night there, I slept without interruption. Not because I wasn't affected, but because uncertainty had ended. Friends reached out carefully. Some avoided details. Others asked direct questions. I kept my responses simple. It ran its course. That was enough. The divorce finalized in under 4 months. Efficient, uncontested, signed without spectacle. When I walked out of the courthouse, the sky was clear. No dramatic symbolism. Just ordinary daylight. There was no victory in it. Just resolution. The leased car that once symbolized disruption had already been reassigned to someone else's driveway. And what remained wasn't anger. It was space. There was no dramatic final scene. No last-minute confession. No attempt at reconciliation. Just paperwork, signatures, and the slow dismantling of shared routines. The condo keys changed hands in early spring. I walked through the empty space one final time before locking the door for good. The walls still held faint outlines where pictures used to hang. Sunlight fell across the hardwood floors in the same pattern it always had. It looked smaller without furniture. Or maybe it just looked honest. Sarah had already moved most of her belongings into a short-term rental closer to her office. We coordinated pickup times like colleagues managing a project timeline. Polite, efficient, detached. The last exchange happened in the parking lot. She stood beside her car, back to the Lexus now. The BMW was gone, reassigned, erased from our street as if it had never been there. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I replied. There was a pause where, in another version of our life, someone might have reached for the other's hand. Neither of us moved. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something closer to neutrality. Once trust is gone, it doesn't regenerate because someone apologizes. It doesn't return because circumstances stabilize. It's structural, foundational. And foundations, once cracked, require demolition, not patchwork. In the weeks that followed, news from her firm filtered indirectly through mutual contacts. Nick's wife finalized her divorce faster than ours. He relocated offices, stepping down from partnership. Official statements framed it as personal restructuring. Language is careful in corporate environments. Sarah remained employed, but her trajectory had changed. Less visibility, fewer travel opportunities. The kind of quiet repositioning that signals limitation without announcement. I didn't celebrate any of it. Their consequences weren't mine to enjoy. My focus narrowed to routine again. Work, gym, evenings that belonged only to me. I removed joint accounts from my banking dashboard, updated beneficiaries, reset passwords. There's something grounding about administrative closure. It reduces memory to line items. Friends invited me out more frequently at first. Some tried to extract details, as if there was drama to harvest. There's not much to say, I'd respond. And there wasn't. An affair had occurred. Evidence had surfaced. Decisions were made. The car that once symbolized betrayal had become irrelevant. It wasn't the object that mattered. It was what it represented. A shift. A boundary crossed without hesitation. Standing in my new apartment one evening, I realized something simple. I hadn't raised my voice once throughout the entire process. Not because I lacked emotion, but because control preserves dignity. And dignity, once maintained, doesn't require validation. The end of our marriage wasn't loud. It was quiet. And in that quiet, I found stability again. Time moved the way it always does, quietly, without asking permission. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I accepted a contract in Seattle. New clients, new office, different skyline. I sold most of what I didn't need and kept the rest minimal. Fewer objects, fewer reminders. Distance helps. Not because it erases memory, but because it changes the angle of it. In Seattle, I rented a small place overlooking the water. Mornings were slower. Evenings belonged entirely to me. No shared calendars. No negotiated plans. Just silence that felt earned instead of empty. Sometimes, walking through residential neighborhoods, I'd notice new cars parked in driveways. Polished paint. Temporary tags. The quiet pride that comes with acquisition. I don't think about money when I see them anymore. I think about context. About how one visible detail can signal something deeper. How a single object, if you're paying attention, can reveal a shift in loyalty, in alignment, in values. The BMW wasn't the betrayal. It was the evidence of one. And the real cost wasn't financial. It was time. 10 years condensed into documentation and signatures. But here's what I understand now. Peace isn't dramatic. It's structured. It comes from recognizing when something has changed and having the discipline not to ignore it. Once trust leaves, it doesn't circle back. You don't chase it. You rebuild somewhere else. And you move forward without noise. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.